Good evening and welcome. A busy Magpie Circle broadcast live tonight with no fewer than 3 guests, including a magpie flying high in Qatar. I'm just about home after multiple road closures on the M1, A1 and 52 back from Boreham Wood last night. Over 600 miles for 1 point from Eastleigh and Boreham Wood. Is that good enough? 600 miles for me and you, Leigh, about 400 for Chloe, while our other guest, he wasn't on trains and planes, but he was watching the Qatar Grand Prix, as you do. I just hope Lewis Hamilton ran over your foot in the paddock.
You know what? That was something else. I mean, I wasn't particularly one. My brothers are more into their F1 than me, but you know, when such a big sporting event comes on your doorstep, it was just a no-brainer. I bumped into half the school that were there anyway, you know. So yeah, it was just
all right. Don't rub it in. Hey, we'll be coming to Doha, Qatar, and your involvement over there very shortly. Back to the green grass of Meadow Lane with Dagenham and the visitors on Saturday. The return of former Notts midfielder Daryl McMahon had a short loan spell. How many of you knew he was in for the job in the infamous summer period when Notts were dropping out of the league? Daryl McMahon was one of those people who were interviewed. Are we setting the bar too high to say we should win the league? Are we setting our sights too low by saying as long as we make the playoffs, that's okay? Your thoughts and views, as always, please. We've just had a quick chat with Paul, former Magpie, now running principal of the British School in Doha. We'll be getting the inside track on the World Cup, which is just under 1 year to go. Chloe joins us, voice of the millennials down from Manchester. But I want to kick off, Leigh, with the story that you've run today. Hot off the press in inverted commas. Clearly, there's been some conjecture about this, but the manager, head coach has gone on the record talking with you. Kyle Wootton, what's the story with him and his contract, which expires at the end of the summer?
Well, basically, as you've just put there, that Kyle's contract is up. There are no plans at the moment to discuss a new deal with him. Ian Birchnell pretty much said that he's got to concentrate on his football and they will address it when both parties think it's right. So that is about where we are at the moment with that story. And it remains to be seen whether he will put pen to paper on a new deal.
What's your take on it? I mean, you and I would know the ins of our outs for the benefit of our Magpie Circle flock is that when a player enters the final 6 months of his contract, he is at liberty to talk to any and all interested clubs from January the 1st and can sign a pre-contract. So as it stands, Kyle Wootton can sign for, I'm making clubs up, Morecambe, Wrexham, whoever, on January the 1st with a contract that would start from the summer. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, firstly, 2 things. I'm a little bit frustrated in the fact that Notts have allowed this situation to develop. And they're not the first club to do it. And I understand the reasons why a lot of non-league League 2 clubs are a bit hesitant to commit to new deals. But for me, I think with Kyle's record in the last 2 seasons, 18 goals in his first season, 19 last year. He's got 9 already this season. He looks on course to, reach another very good, healthy total again. I can't quite understand why the club didn't sit down with him in the summer and put a contract on the table to him then. Because what the situation is now is Kyle's on 9 goals. If I'm his agent, and I'm pretty sure his agent will be saying exactly the same thing, is hold out. You can hold out now. You've scored. His goals to game ratio as a Notts player is absolutely fantastic. He's playing really well this season. I thought he was superb last night, the way he led the line. And I'm sure his agent will just say, look, stick it out. He has all the power, which is often the case in these circumstances. If Notts had put a deal to him on the table in the summer, then perhaps we would be the conversation that we might be having is who's going to pay the money to get him? At the moment, the risk that Notts run, and it's a very real risk, is that they're going to lose a very good player for nothing. And to be honest, it's not the first time I've ever seen it happen. I remember Lincoln many times. I know when I was covering them, I got really frustrated with them because they lost a lot of good players on free transfers because they were hesitant to hand out new deals because they knew that they would probably have to put their hand in their pocket to get them to sign a new deal. So in that respect, players like Gareth McCauley left on a free transfer. Jamie McComb left for $5,000, I think it was, to Crewe. So, you know, and they were two fantastic players for Lincoln. And, they, you know, if they'd have sorted out that contract situation earlier, they probably would have garnered a fair transfer fee. And it's the same with Carl Wootton at the moment. And I'm sure, like I said, his agent will be in his ear and saying, look, you know, you carry on, you get to 20 goals this season, given your history and your goals record, he will have the pick of the clubs. And I know from speaking to a couple of scouts that League 2 teams, League 1 teams are watching him. And of course, if any of those are big teams and they put a decent contract to him on the table and are not out of the National League, then I can see him going.
Notts paid a fee, didn't they, for Kyle to get him out of Scunthorpe? You obviously know Ian well. You speak with Kyle. Do you think this has been allowed to happen because Notts aren't quite sure on Kyle? Yeah, and are going to run the clock down? Or is this just kind of, as always, in the art of negotiation, there's a bit of brinkmanship?
I think you're right. I think it is brinkmanship. I've seen it happen numerous times before. I mean, Kyle's not the highest paid player at the football club as well, so that might come into the equation. So I think there's a lot of things to happen. I mean, I've got no doubt that Kyle Wootton is very happy at Notts County. You know, he's settled, he's a tremendous pro, he's been given the vice captaincy this season. Ian's given him a lot more leadership, and that's been borne out in his performances on the pitch. I think he's been fantastic. You know, you speak to a lot of managers or scouts who have been to watch him in the National League, they think he is a Football League striker. And I would have to agree with that. I think he's very good at everything. He's good with his back to goal. He can go in behind. He scores goals with his head. He's a decent finisher. And of course, if he does leave, then Notts have got that tricky proposition of replacing a striker who could, if things go to plan, will have scored 60 goals or near enough 60 goals in 3 seasons, which, as we've seen before with the likes of Christian Dennis when he left, you know, they found it very hard to replace him. So I think there's a long way to go. But I think the better Kyle plays and the more goals he scores, the more difficult it will be for Notts, I think, to keep hold of him, unless they are willing to, you know, really put their hand in their pocket and make him an offer he can't refuse.
I think it would also be fair to say, Leigh, that the money that Notts were paying in terms of salaries when the club first went down and players were given good contracts, and some of those players clearly are still on those contracts. But there is a view now that the money's being offered in year 3, i.e. this year of National League. Perhaps the cloth is being tightened a little bit now. And so contracts that were on offer 2 years ago would not necessarily be on offer now.
No, I think some of the budget did come down, I think, from the previous season. But I mean, Kyle's a really funny one because, you know, when we were told about the ethos of the football club and the model is to invest in these players, develop them, then sell them on. Well, they've done that with Kyle. When Kyle came to Notts from Scunthorpe, it was initially on loan. And we were saying we're all a bit unsure of how he was going to do. But he came in, you know, hit the ground running, was absolutely terrific in that first season. And Notts have developed him into a fantastic striker. I mean, and, you know, you would say ordinarily if he was under contract, you're looking at 150, 200,000 pounds. I think he's that good. But unfortunately, with the contract situation and with the club unsure, you know, when they're going to actually sit down and talk to him, they're now in this sort of dicey position where they may actually lose him for nothing. I think that would be a great shame because Notts have played an intrinsic role in his development. He's gone on to become one of the best centre forwards in the National League. Certainly up there with the very best. I rate him up there with Shamanga, although they're two very different types of players. I just think it's a little bit frustrating from a financial point of view that Notts could end this whole scenario without a transfer fee, and that's a little bit disappointing.
Watch this space, I think, over the coming weeks and months. Duncan Connery says, Woots hedging his bet, stay if we go up or leave for a decent signing on fee if we don't. Duncan Connery says, to be fair, can't blame him. Chris Gosling says, if these players have ambitions to play league football, then they should be good enough to get us there. Ian Birchinall says, don't get Notts' handling of the Woods contract. Can see why he would drag it out as he is then in control. Chris Gosling again, give him a pay rise, put a £100,000 release clause in the contract. All parties are happy. Gary Wardle, we've had to play to Kyle's strengths. If he goes, we could change. So that's kind of like one of the top stories of the day. Let's go to sunnier climes. Doha in Qatar. Former Magpie, Paul Sherlock. We've had you on with some of your fellow YTs from 30 years ago. Good to have you back on the show.
Yeah, good to be back, Paul. Thank you.
Yes. So a year to go, Doha, Qatar. Now, we do have quite a few Notts fans, that are very much England aficionados. Troy Pope, I know, is one that goes to every England game. And when you watch England at Wembley and countries all around the world, you'll see a flag, normally, with Notts County on it. So we have quite a few Notts fans making every England game. What are they going to expect? What's the World Cup going to be like in Qatar?
Well, I think, it's been 10 years now since Qatar was sort of we're celebrating the success of actually getting the World Cup for the first time, and the infrastructure, I think, is one of the biggest things, the biggest sort of developments that they've invested in. 8 brand new purpose-built stadiums, all within a radius of 25, 30 kilometres. Which they're talking about it being one of the most compact World Cups that there's ever been, and essentially, you'd be able to go to at least 3 games, a day, during the group stages. They're very much into the culture. They talk about the experience of being part of the Middle East and breaking down stereotypes. Visitors will be coming to a Muslim country where it's very, very different, living out here to it is, being back in the UK. And I think Qatar wants to showcase that, what life is like out here in the Middle East. And, the investment that have gone into the stadiums, more than anything, is just unbelievable. I've been fortunate. I went to the Liverpool, not the Champions League game, the Club World Cup game last year when they played, and it was my first experience in going into some of the World Cup stadiums, and they really are state of the art, air conditioned, all brand new. Just the training facilities. There's an expats football league out here. I don't play in it, not none of these days. But they're training on the World Cup teams' training facilities, essentially. It's not like playing back at Melbourne Park back at home or anything like that. It really is state of the art. So yeah, I think people that they really want to embrace the culture. They want people to see what life is like here as out here in the Middle East, essentially. So yeah, it's exciting times.
We'll delve into a little bit more detail about Doha World Cup, your role out there. I've been to Qatar, and I have to say I was very impressed with it. I've been there for 3 or 4 days, met a few people with the Qatari FA, the Qatari Stars League, I think it's called. So I've been to a Qatari League game at Al Wakra. There you go. Yeah. I am the envy of all ground hoppers now for having been to Al Wakra. Anyway, we'll come back to that shortly. I know Leigh has to leave us around about 7:30. Let's just bring in Chloe. Chloe, you're staking a claim for longest journey from Manchester yesterday down to Boreham Wood. Now, I think also as part of your UFCB project, you're just doing a little something with us through our Magpie Circle platform, wanting to know and understand where everybody came from last night and all the rest of it, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So we met a couple of people because obviously I came with you, Paul, last night. Met a few different people. They've all got stories of coming from different places. So it's great to hear from fans. And yeah, I'll be on the social media page for the next couple of weeks. So get interacting. We want to hear your stories. This is kind of what we do it for. We want to hear all of your views and everything. So interact as much as you can, get on the podcast, and we want to hear from all of you. So send us over your stories of last night and Eastleigh and any other game that you've got a story about.
Yeah, I mean, it is always very good. And as I mentioned here, if I can get their names right, for father and son, Alan and Ollie Carnell. Alan's first Notts game was in the 1950s, a Radford lad. And we bumped into him up when we just got the commuter train back from Elstree and Boreham Wood to Luton Airport Parkway before a very long drive home. And he was there with his son. And it was great to chat with them. They're based in Harpenden. And I think Alan told us the story about how Notts County very nearly killed him when he collapsed at Aldershot a few years ago. But anyway, he looks all right now. He was struggling to get up that hill that you have to go up to Aldershot before you then drop down the woods to get into the away end. But he's all right. He looked good. And it was good to catch up with them. So wherever you travel to Notts, share some of your stories, how many miles you cover, where do you come from? And that will help Chloe with her UFCB project. Leigh, so you clocked up the miles like me. And I think we're at a stage here where you can argue and use statistics to justify whatever your point of view happens to be. So on the one hand, you can turn around, and I was just looking at this, you can turn around and say, in our last 7 league games, we've only lost one. 1-4 drawn, 2 last 1. Other people with a more negative view will turn around and say, we've only won 4 of our last 10 by including that run of 3. I think everyone was very enthused by that run, getting the result at Grimsby, playing those, getting against Solihull. But I think unquestionably 1 point from 2 away games is kind of forcing some people to reevaluate and reappraise. Where are you on this debate?
Listen, I think Notts are in a very, very handy position. I thought last night, they were excellent for the first 45 minutes. I thought they controlled the ball, controlled the game against a team who were on an excellent home run. I don't think they've been beaten on their own patch this season. Very difficult team to play against, but I thought Notts were to a man, were fantastic in the first 45 minutes. The only disappointment being that they couldn't turn that control into more goals. I think that was probably the only disappointment that I had watching them. I enjoyed watching them. I thought they were very bright, very lively. And then Boreham Wood turned it into a bit more of a scrap and the game became a bit more open. And it was a bit disappointing, a bit frustrating at the fact that it was their only real chance on goal that they equalised with. I don't think Sam Slocum had a save to make outside of that. And then obviously you go and contrast that with the performance at Eastleigh, which I did agree with Ian. I thought it did look a bit leggy. They did look a bit tired. I think my biggest concern with Notts at the moment is I think 1 to 11, they have a very good team. Possibly, I would say, up there with the best starting 11 in the league. I think when they're all fit and ready to play, I think they're a very good team, really good to watch. Been really impressed by some of the performances. It's just outside of that whether the squad is strong enough to keep going as it is with the amount of games that are coming up, particularly coming up over Christmas. Nemain's out injured with a fractured hand. Jim O'Brien's been missing through illness. Connell's obviously been out ill. Carl Cameron's been out. So that's probably my only concern. In terms of the amount of points they've got away, I think if you'd have taken a point at Boreham Wood in isolation to go away to a team who are second in the league and haven't lost at home all season, you'd probably say that was a good point. Unfortunately, we had the Eastleigh game before that. So I'm not worried, really. I think Notts have got the ability to go on a run and stick 4 or 5 or go 4 or 5 games and beat them, no problem at all. Unfortunately for them is that the teams above them, Chesterfield, for example, just keep on winning. They're just a machine at the moment. So you'd ideally, when I was thinking that we were on this really good run and won 4 games out of 5, you're thinking, can we then turn that into 6 or 7 and really apply the pressure on the leaders? We haven't quite been able to do that. And Chesterfield just keep on racking up the results. And I think, last night, I think now, what are they, 4 points clear at the top ahead of Boreham Wood? So I think it's going to be a big ask, I think. And particularly, I think, outside of the starting 11, and now we've got a couple of injuries, and obviously Kieran Brennan's gone back and Patterson's gone back as well. I've noticed a few fans wonder whether the squad depth is good enough, and I'd have to agree. It's something that I'm not sure about, particularly with the hectic run of games that we are going to have coming up, particularly over the Christmas period. But I've been really impressed with them. Largely, I think they've played terrific games. The only problem, I think, Notts have this reputation of being a bit of a big game team, don't they? They don't, the games where you'd expect them to win, like going to Eastleigh or Woking at home, or Woking at home. Sorry, they're the teams you'd expect them to beat, but they can't quite get over the line. Yet you stick them up against a Grimsby or a Stockport, that brings the best out of them. So, it's the games where you'd expect them to get something. I wonder whether the lack of atmosphere at these games does sort of go against them a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think my concern, as I've said before, is still that when we are in relative control of the game, because I don't think you can be in total control of a game when you're winning 1-0. I think you can be in total control of a game when you're certainly 3-0 up, and 2-0 you're a lot more in control of a game than when you're 1-0. But you would like to think we could have seen last night out, having got in front, having got the first goal at Boreham Wood for 6-7 games, whatever it was, and we got pretty good value for it. And it is to be expected that Boreham Wood and most teams will go longer against us, won't it, in terms of a longer ball, because several teams have had success doing that. And I guess there was a school of thought, aside from the handball, the ball was in our final third because of the way we'd kept possession in the goal mouth and then got caught out a little bit.
Yeah, it was definite handball for the goal. The goal shouldn't have been allowed to stand. It was a misdefined decision by the referee not to award a handball. Kid scooped it. It was blatant. It was the clearest handball you're likely to see. But and that's like you say, it's disappointing. The goals against Eastleigh, there were 2 poor ones to concede. We thought they'd knock that on the head. Conceding goals from crosses and set pieces. 2 of Rochdale's goals in the FA Cup defeat were both from crosses as well, weren't they? So we thought they'd knock that on the head. I have to say, I think the return of Alex Lacey and Carl Cameron has been a massive boost. I think they are 2 excellent defenders. And if Rawlinson can get himself fit, maybe we could see Richard Brindley move to right wing back. I don't know, because I think Rawlinson, Lacey, and Cameron together in the back three would be some back trio, I have to say. But listen, they're in a really good position still. I think what's important is they get back on the horse as quickly as possible and do what they were doing a few weeks ago, which is stringing back-to-back wins together, picking up points, and putting themselves out there, ready to capitalise if Chesterfield, by some chance, end up going through a bit of a dodgy spell. I know they've got an injury to a key player, Jeff King. I learned last night he's out until the new year or beyond Christmas. So, you don't know how that's going to impact them. And I think I just want Notts to be in a position where they can capitalise on it and start knocking teams away. I think that's because that's the only thing. They've got the ability, they've got the attacking quality. I think last night they were in some really promising positions. Just the final ball let them down, particularly early on in the second half when Cal Roberts put that terrific cross into the back post and Carl Wootton just couldn't get there. So I always feel that Notts are going to create chances, but I'm with you. I think there's parts of the game where you never quite feel safe in certain circumstances, and they could probably do with. I know they kept a clean sheet against Solihull Moors, but Rochdale scored 2, Eastleigh scored 2, 1 last night. You just need to have a bit of defensive solidity in there as well.
And sorry for I'm not ignoring Chloe or Paul, but Leigh is away very shortly, so we just focus on it. We'll wrap up with one question, Leigh, then we can talk with both Paul and Chloe. So a few comments coming in. Dale Pikett, do we need a fox in the box when we are on top in games? Gary Wardle, IB did revert to shoot on sight at the end of last season and will again when he has to. Philip Gardy says, not able to score a second was the real reason we didn't win the match. Woots needs a goal-scoring partner. That's been an issue all season. Gary Phillips, are we any further forward this season than we were at this stage last season? Chris Gosling, I think we are working from a better base compared to this time last year. Think the team do know what they are supposed to be doing, just need to execute it better. Inspector 71, who we met up with last night, being ultra positive. Spy Rights fixtures have been easier than ours so far in terms of the number of teams they have played in the top 10. Have they been really tested? Well, I guess Altrincham did in the last few minutes last night. It's one for you, Leigh. Nice, easy, simple one. Gary Phillips, are we any further forward this season than we were at this stage last season?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. I'd have to go back and see what the table was. I think we were in and around this position last year.
Very similar, I believe.
Yeah, very similar around. So I think what I like about Notts compared to this season, I think the football is a lot more easy on the eye in terms of the intent. I think there's the situation with Ruben, because obviously like this time last year, Ruben was struggling for form, weren't we? We were debating what position is what was his best position. You know, Ian pulled something off a masterstroke by putting him up front with Kyle. The centre halves come in. Kyle Cameron's been a great signing. Matty Palmer's probably been my player of the season so far. He's been terrific in the heart of that midfield. So I do agree with the fact, I think that the base of the squad in terms of its quality is better than last season. But like everything else, it's all about results, isn't it? And putting runs together. And we have seen flashes of a brilliant team who on their day are absolutely as good as, if not probably the best team in the league in terms of the way they play and how entertaining they can be. But on the flip side of that, we've also seen they've got sometimes can have a little bit of a soft underbelly. So I think it's like everything else. You've got to be ruthless in both boxes. Are we any further on? I'd probably say we're at the same stage, I would say. Can we go on and win the title? I don't think it's out of reach, but I think what's got to happen is like I've just said, Notts have got to go on a 7 or 8 game and beat and run and be ready to capitalise should Chesterfield start to fall away or endure a couple of bad results. Looking at them at the moment and looking at the squad and how good it is in terms of its depth and quality, it looks like it's going to be tough. And at this moment in time, if you were to ask me where I think Notts will finish, I think it'll be the playoffs.
Is that good enough?
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, there's only one play. There's only one automatic promotion spot, isn't there? I mean, there's 20. How many teams in the league? 23 this year. The level of investment in some of the squads this year has been frightening. And you looked at Chesterfield, and when they were signing Shimanga and the rest of them, you thought they're going to have a really good chance, and that's how it's proven. They've invested heavily in the squad. Is it good enough for Notts? Notts couldn't compete with that level of finance. They were offered Shimanga, the chance to sign Shimanga, couldn't afford him. Could have probably afforded his wages, but I think it was the transfer fee that posed the biggest problem.
Is that right? Is that so? Your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, Shimanga's agent had spoken to Notts, and I think there was a conversation in terms of how much would it cost, and it was just cost prohibitive. I mean, the transfer fee was 250 grand. I don't think, if you look at the model, that seems to be at the other end of the model that Notts are going for, which is investing players like the likes of Joel Taylor, Cairo Mitchell, sort of those signings who perhaps not valued at other clubs, but represent a really good value for money. And certainly Joel Taylor's been a terrific signing. So it's just a case of, I don't think Notts could have competed with that level of investment in the Chesterfield team. And I know people say money isn't everything, but you'd have to say at the moment, Chesterfield have the money. It's been money well spent, hasn't it? Shimanga's absolutely tearing it up in terms of goals.
What do you think Shimanga's worth now?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'd definitely say he's probably knocked £100,000 on his fee, 350 grand, 400 grand. I don't think they'll sell him though, to be honest. I did see somebody last night pose a question: do you think Chesterfield will sell him in January? I think if they're at the top of the league and they're clear, I don't see him leaving Chesterfield at all. And I don't think there'd be any teams in League Two or League One who could probably afford the kind of money that they would want for him anyway. So, but if they do sell him, perhaps they could buy the frost covers.
Yeah, that is going to be an ongoing debate, and you just know, Friday, December the 21st, when we're due to go up there, it is going to be -4. Yeah, and it's going to be, I guarantee it, and it will be interesting to see whether the match is on or off. If Chesterfield lose 3 games before it, right, they'll have lost the frost covers, right, and get the match off. If Chesterfield have won 3 on the spin, right,
they'll have the air dryers out,
veils on it, you name it, that game will take place, irrespective of whether they've got straw covering or not. Leigh, thank you ever so much. I know you're on shift, so we will let you get on, and we will stop ignoring Chloe and Paul. Thank you very much indeed. Speak soon.
Good evening. Take care. Ta-da.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for bearing with us. Let's go to Chloe first, just for a fan's eye view. Quite interesting about Shimanga. Wasn't fully aware of all of that myself in terms of not being offered Shimanga. So what was your take on last night, Chloe?
I mean, exactly like Leigh said, independently, you look at the game, second in the league at the time, we're away. We all talk about how good their home form was. I think I read somewhere that before the game, it was over 515 minutes since they conceded at home, which is a long time in football. And we went there and we scored, which clearly not many teams have managed this season. But you've got to take Eastleigh into account. I don't think anyone really would have been happy with a point out of the 2 games, considering we were going on a little bit of a run, and it was a little bit disappointing to obviously go 1-0 up. And I felt like it was a game that we could have seen out, whether that was see it out at 1-0 or score another and kind of take control of the game. But exactly like Leigh said, it got a little bit scrappy. They know how to wind out a result. That's why they are where they are. They kind of took their one chance where no handball, it's in the back of the net and the ref's given it. And then we couldn't just get it over the line and take the win. But again, realistically, I'm happy with a point, all in all. It's just a little bit disappointing the way we went about it, but it's a better performance than I've heard than Eastleigh. I didn't make it down this season there. But I've heard from a lot of people that this was a big improvement, which is a little bit of a bounce back. It's what you want. Going to the game on Saturday against Dagenham, and home game on TV, get a good crowd behind them. I fancy us on Saturday. Obviously, they're dropping form a little bit, but yeah, overall a little bit disappointed, just kind of how the game went. But happy to take a point. It's better than a loss this season.
From afar, Paul, is it bringing back memories of when you was an apprentice at Notts and playing there? We're all dissecting it. We're all, hey, all that matters is what the manager thinks, to be fair, but we're all getting into it and all doing this, that, and the other. And oh yeah, someone who we both know, you know him better than me, Mr. Shacklock. I don't know whether you've got the chat section on. How have I managed to get you away from the golf club? Is it flooded out there so you can play at night as well?
Oh yeah, it's floodlit. Yeah. Oh crikey, yeah. No expense spared out here for anything. Crikey, it is everything is 5-star, literally.
Yeah, VIP paddock Grand Prix Sunday, floodlit golf whenever you want, no lower than 85 degrees. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, just
Why
this
did you
week.
go
I
to
mean,
Doha? Why did you go out there? I can't believe you've left
I
Eastwood or
know.
Hall Park
Exactly,
Academy, wherever you
exactly. I
were.
must have done something wrong in another life. But yeah, I mean, just at the Grand Prix, just the level of big name stars that are out here at the moment. You know, Beckham was there. I think Beckham signed some new contract out with some ambassador for Qatar. I don't know if you've seen that in the media. John Terry was out here, and I think they were all at the golf club at the weekend after the Grand Prix. I saw something posted somewhere. So yeah, it's a little bit of a who's who at the minute. Very much so.
And so just talk to me, because you are principal of the British school, and I have to say it's very, very well done. You put together a video from your school as part of the countdown to the World Cup, correct?
Yeah. So what it was. So I'm out here now as principal of Doha British School. It's a private school, 2,000 students, EYFS all the way to year 13, and it's a great place to work. Full of UK, teachers, Irish, Scottish, that come and work with us. And we wanted to do something that sort of, earmarked the 1 year countdown. And it's been quite high profile out here, what the Qataris have done. So we had a bit of we got our heads together, me and the guys at work, and we got together with the marketing team. And we thought about modelling it on the Nike Brazil advert through the airport. I don't know if you guys remember that.
And everything.
So we very much modelled it on that, and then ultimately the ball ended up with me, and I did a few keep your peas at the end, and then walked out of school with my bag, and it's gone down really well at school, and we've tried to get a bit of PR for the school, but also to celebrate the 1 year countdown as well.
Chris Gosling asks, what will the support be like from the people of Qatar for the host nation? Because they've brought, as a lot of the smaller countries do, they tend to target, inverted commas, nationals that can be adopted or whatever. And Qatar have got a half decent team now, haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, they did win in the Asia Cup, I think, about 2 years ago. That really put them on the map. The local, they want Qatar to be a global hub of sport. There was I think you came out, Paul, didn't you, for the athletics? So there was the Diamond League Athletics that was out here about 2 years ago. There's been the World Club Championships next month. I think, in fact, November the 30th, the Arab Cup starts. And that is very much, I mean, I've got tickets to the Bahrain Amman game, and I've got tickets to the final, so I'll be going to those. But that is very much almost a replica of a sort of a test, really, for how Qatar will cope with the World Cup. And all the locals, Xavi was the manager of Al Sadd, who's just gone back to Barcelona now. The lad from Rodriguez from Everton has come out here. So they're investing in these big names. And yeah, the Qataris love their sport. They really do. There's this sports sort of like a centre of excellence, if you like, called Aspire. And very often, the top sports guys are here, whether they're getting medical advice or whether it's a training camp. They're using Qatar now and Qatar's facilities because they are up there with the best in the world. So yeah,
I mean, you touched on it, and I noticed it when I was out there. That Doha is not a big place. You're going to have something like 6 of the 8 World Cup venues within a 15-mile radius.
Yeah.
And they've kind of hooked it all up with a brand new driverless metro system, which is state of the art. And you can whiz around really, really easily, and I'll be out there. And when I was at the Brazil World Cup, I think in about 27 days that I was out there, I saw about 5 games. Yeah. Because it was kind of a physical impossibility to get anywhere. There's very little transport infrastructure in Brazil. It's quite dangerous getting around in certain parts of Brazil to the football grounds. Traffic was an absolute nightmare. It's going to be exactly the opposite in Qatar. It's going to be incredibly safe, no issues with that. And you're going to be able to whiz from one World Cup venue to another in 15, 20 minutes on the metro.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. That is one of the sort of selling points that they're talking about, and this, they've invested millions and millions on this new metro system, which literally is state of the art. It's fantastic. They're also pushing the sustainability side of things. I read this week or heard somewhere that I think 30% of the buses that will be available will be new electric buses. Even the stadium, you may have read it, and even the stadiums, one of the particular stadiums they call it the 974 stadium, is made of shipping containers. So there are 974 shipping containers. It's right next to the port. And if you can picture the stadium has a structure, but within it are these shipping containers. And then at the end of the World Cup, that will be dismantled, and the shipping containers will revert back to some other usage or whatever. But yeah, they're talking a lot about the sustainable impact of the games. There's a stadium in what's called Education City, which is very near one of the golf clubs. And at the end of the World Cup, they talk about the legacy of the World Cup, that they're going to convert parts of the Education City into 2 schools. So there'll be 2 new schools campuses within the stadium. So the thinking that's gone in to these stadiums and the design is really is top drawer.
How will the infrastructure cope? Because it's an awful lot of people coming into a very small, localized city, not much bigger than Nottingham. I
mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, I've been into my 3rd year. I've been here now, and you've been living in a building site for a lot of the time. You can imagine the hotels are going up left, right, and centre. So there's a lot of investment going in, economic investment, in terms of the hotels and so on. And again, that's part of the legacy in terms of they want to attract. Like in Russia 2018, not many people perhaps had been to Russia, but because of the success of the World Cup, Russia then became more of an attractive sort of destination for tourists. And I think that's very much what Qatar's hoping for, with visitors coming in. And it will be strange because during the day, in the heat of the summer, you don't see anybody. Everyone stays inside because it's that hot. So the fact that we're going to have an influx of people, in the November time, that will be interesting. It'd be interesting to see just now as a local how Qatar will manage that, because it will be a new venture for them, and I'm not sure they'll see the sites that they've seen previously for sure.
Chloe, let's just dart back from the World Cup to the National League. Dear me, the National League. I've still not come to grips with it. Similar question, I guess, that we asked Leigh. Notts fans kind of fall into 2 camps, I think. One's infrastructure, size of crowd, best players in the league. We've got to win the league. Yeah. Others getting into the playoffs. That's fine. And I sometimes think there's a divide there in almost in age, with people perhaps more used to not historically being a league club and can never remember them being anything other than a league club. What's your take on that?
I think you've got to be realistic. You can't just take into account us. It takes a lot for you to win the league. You've got to take so much into consideration this season. We've been down here, 3rd season now, and it's got progressively harder. I think a lot of people will agree that we've had 2 big chances to get promoted from this league, and it's just got harder. I think, don't get me wrong, we take COVID into consideration for the 1st season, and we were talking about this last night, that I honestly believe that we'd have gone up in that season had it not have been for COVID. I think we had that much momentum going that we would have either nicked the league or we would have gone up through the playoffs with the momentum. And then the next season, it got a little bit harder. And now we're into this season and money's being spent like it's never been spent before. There's players in this league, there's managers in this league that a few years ago, you'd have never have dreamt of dropping out of the Football League to come and play in the National League, which we've seen many times this season. We've got players ourselves that have dropped out of the Football League to come and play for us, and that of many other clubs. So like Leigh said, I don't know if any single club in this league, fans, I think it's different if you actually spoke to the club, there's a lot of clubs that will say they want to win the league. Of course there is. But if you speak to the fans that kind of go every week, if you ask the fans of all the National League clubs, I don't think any one of them realistically, with a realistic head on them, would say that they are going to win the league and they're confident they're going to win the league. There's one spot, and a lot needs to happen for you to get that one spot. You have to be so consistent. You have to also not only kind of get the results against the smaller teams. It's so vitally important that you kind of win the mini league out of the teams in and around the playoffs. You've got to be beating them and not letting teams kind of fall away from you, which is a good thing about last night. They've made no points on us. That's why I see the games that we've played against kind of playoff rising. We've actually come out of it very well. We were saying we had a really big run of games for the last month or so that everyone was saying it'll make or break us, and realistically we've done well out of those games. So that you keep going, but realistically, do I think we're going to win the league? To be perfectly honest, no. Do I know who is going to win the league? Absolutely not. It's a very difficult one. I'd love to see us second or third. I think it's really important that you get that home tie. I don't know whether it's so much important. There's a less game to play because it can always help with momentum if you've gone in and played the week before, and then the other team's obviously rested that's not had to play in the quarter final. But I think we all saw last season it was a little bit different because of the crowds. But we played Chesterfield at home in the quarter final, and I don't think we would have won that game had it have been away. And then obviously we went to Torquay, none of our fans were there, away from home, and it just got away from us. So I think it really would help us getting in that top two, but it's going to be a difficult task. I don't think anybody's going to walk away with this league. I think at the moment it is looking like Chesterfield, to be completely honest. If they keep hold of Schmanga, and he's one of them where I think he's 17 in 17 or something ridiculous. And when you've got somebody on top of their form and they're like that all season, there's kind of no stopping them. But even they've slipped up last night. So nothing's impossible. So we'll see. But definitely playoffs. I wouldn't accept anything other than, but hoping to get that second or third spot.
Plenty of comments coming in, and we'll go to Paul's thoughts in a minute. Inspector 71, the reality is we can't compete in the National League with at least 3 clubs who have played their cards with the intention of winning the league. We are hedging our bets, and our approach is more of a gamble. Ian Birchnell said, I agree with Chloe, this season is more difficult than ever before. Chris Gosling, we can still do it, Ian. I do think we could do with a couple of new faces to freshen it up in January, as I think our rivals will continue to strengthen. David Shorter says there could be a number of clubs in financial difficulties if they miss out on promotion this year. Well, the reality is there's going to be 1 or 2 by reasons of mathematics that aren't going to be going up. So it will be interesting to see. Michael Wall, top 3 is a must. Gives us a better chance of winning in the playoffs. Chris Gosling, looking at the League 2 table, it could get harder next year. You're looking at potentially established league clubs on the face of it coming down. Inspector 71, but could we really not afford a proven striker who knows where the goal is? Ian Birchnell, we just have to keep averaging 2 points per game and at some point get a run like we did previously. Chris Gosling, Notts can win 2 games in a row. Winning 3 in a row is something we struggle with. That's why I think top 3 is essential. Paul, so out in Doha, Notts County was the club where you cut your teeth, came through the youth system. You had a few games, well, a lot more games for Mansfield in terms of senior. You still keep eyes and ears open on what's happening at Meadow Lane?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of my mates are season ticket holders. You know, as you say, Alex Shacklock, you mentioned earlier. You know, I'm sure you know Little Suds, Paul Sudlow. Those, yeah, I do, and you know, they keep me abreast of how things are going on, and I mean, through the internet these days, you get all the live matches as well. So you know, where I can, I do try and watch what I can.
Will you be able to watch Notts Dagenham on Saturday? Can you get BT out there?
Yeah.
So are you going to tear yourself away from the floodlit golf course to watch the game?
I know exactly. That's it. It's all right at the moment. It's quite cool outside, so yeah, we're all right. We get out quite a bit. It's all good. All good.
But yeah, you still keep an eye out for your old club, and presumably, like so many of us, it's you pinch yourself to think National League 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. That's it. I mean, when the kids at school talk about, especially now we've done the video recently, and they say, "Blimey, sir, you've got a bit, sort of thing." I say, "Wow," and then I talk about the club that I played for, and they think, "Well, Notts County, who were they?" Sort of thing, type thing, But yeah, clearly, the fact that they're not in the league at the moment is a disappointment. But looking from afar, you obviously hope that they do eventually get back up in the league and go on to the successes that they had when the likes of myself and the other lads were around in the 90s.
And of course, a good friend and a former playing colleague of yours going through the apprentice or academy ranks was Paul Cox, and Paul has first-hand experience of what it takes to get out of the National League. And I think Chris Wilder was talking fairly recently, saying, one of the hardest jobs you can have in football ain't necessarily been in the Premier League, trying to get a team out of the National League.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I noticed that when I left Notts and went to Mansfield, and then left Mansfield and went into non-league, it's tough. It was hard, and I was doing my teacher training at the same time. So you're juggling in those days. You're juggling a job and your part-time football, playing in the non-league circuit, and it's a tough league to get out of, most definitely. It is going to be a hard task for them, most definitely.
But is there a difference in culture between players who are born, raised, and bred through a professional football club system and those from a more non-league perspective, if you know what I mean, who've not necessarily been able to have the advantages of being full-time from 16 to 18 through academies and all the rest of it, and have had to take jobs and play football, get a bit of money on the side and that sort of thing?
The answer, I guess, could be yes, because my son now is at Barnsley, so he's in his first year. He's just gone through the scholarship. He's got first year pro at Barnsley, so he's been in the academy system all his life, from being at Forest at under 10s all the way through, and has had setbacks and so on and so forth. But he's only ever known
Forest under 10s there. Sorry.
Yeah, well, this was the thing.
We're not over the road.
Yeah,
over the road. Come on.
Exactly, but you know what? He used to have his Notts County shirt under his Forest training kit. And that's a true story. Yeah,
good lad.
So under sevens, obviously. But here's an example where they've only ever known academy football. So to then go into the men's world and be thrown in at the deep end in non-league football, it's very, very different. And again, using him as an example, when he got released from Forest for a period of time, he goes back into grassroots football and comes back hungrier, physically more stronger, wanting it more. So I don't know, it works both ways, that sometimes if you've been out of the system, there's a hunger and desire to get back into it more than perhaps those people that have just been successful and have just naturally progressed through that route. But yeah, I mean, you hear success stories either way, don't you? Those that go through the system, and again, the very small minority that actually do go on and make it, plus the ones that are picked from non-league, from a perhaps they are working and so on, that ultimately do make it as a pro as well. Different journeys to the same end goal, isn't it? We all come from different walks of life, and we all at the time dream of being playing league football for your team.
Chloe, the debate about what is acceptable or where we think Notts will be, I think there's two sides to the coin. And looking at a lot of these observations from fans here, Gary Phillips says, if you look at the top 7, we have the worst record for winning by 2 or more goals. How many times have we taken the lead only to throw it away and draw or lose? My answer would be too many. Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, probably because I'm so used to not being a league club and having seen them for many years in higher divisions, um, I find it personally very difficult that, for me, anything other than Notts winning the league or winning the playoffs is a failure. And I know that's really brutal, and I know that's being really tough. But there's winners and there's losers in life, and to be honest, margins aren't always massive. And I think with all of the assets that we have, stadium, fan base, players, I'm struggling to accept 6th or 7th or whatever as kind of being a benchmark. I really am. I totally understand this is the hardest division for us to be in this season, given the money's being spent. Okay. But let's be honest, Notts County spent the most money in the year we were down in this division. Okay. And we didn't go up. Okay. So I don't think that can be used as a kind of, well, because we haven't spent as much money as Wrexham doesn't mean, therefore I take the point about we can't compete. But I don't think that becomes an excuse to say, well, actually, really, yeah, if 5th or 6th, I just think, we have to be rubbing shoulders, be it with a Chesterfield or Grimsby. And at the minute, other than the first 3 or 4 weeks, we haven't really pushed that top spot or second spot. Some of our fan base are a little bit disparaging about Boreham Wood. They've sold Shumanga just before the start of the season. Just before the start, and they're second. 18 months ago, they sold Sorba Thomas, and he's now a Welsh full international playing for Huddersfield. So lots of other clubs have all these sorts of challenges, and ultimately, it's how you deal with them. It's how you deal with them. So I tend to be. Michael Ward is saying, no, it's not brutal, Paul. Once you start believing you belong in non-league, that is surely where you will stay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, those sentiments I wouldn't disagree with. Gary Phillips, I would argue that we've gone backwards from our first season down here, but are possibly slightly further forward this season to last, but still a long way from winning it without investment in Jan. Would you like to see new blood coming into the squad in January, Chloe?
I think the squad needs improving the depth. I think, like Leigh said, we've got a very good starting 11. And we've got another couple of players. I don't know if you want to call them fringe players, kind of the ones that are on the bench. That we've got a couple that are good and they can improve the side. But the problem is, behind that, once you pick up injuries, you've then just got down to your starting 11. We've seen this season, we've had a few injuries to key players. It's obviously not an excuse. Your whole squad's got to be good enough. It's all right having a good starting 11. As soon as you pick up any injuries and you've got no one sat on the bench, you'll soon be dropping down the league. I think we've got a little bit more than the starting 11. I'd probably say 13, possibly, that I think are very good. As soon as you take injuries into consideration, that soon becomes 11, 10. We've obviously had a keeper on loan that kind of became our first keeper with Slocum being out. And to take that away, I'm not saying that Slocum's a bad keeper at all. I don't think anyone would have said we really needed to replace him until he was injured. I just think we've all got used to the style of football that Patterson played, and now that's got to change a little bit. Slocum isn't the same goalkeeper as what Patterson is. So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. But yeah, I'd like to see maybe, I don't know, it's difficult to invest in January because realistically, who's going to let their best players go? And we all know that we're not putting our hands in our pockets and splashing the cash here, there and everywhere. And I know a lot of people also don't like loan players. So it's a difficult one. I think either way, you've got to bring a couple of people in. I get this whole argument about this proven goal scorer. We've had the argument all season. You're not going to get him on in January unless you find kind of a gem, as we have done with Roberts and Ruben. But it must be so difficult to sit and look through a list of players and you don't know we could have signed Shimanga and he could have got injured in the first week of training. Anything can happen. But yeah, I think this side, without any investment, without any loan players, I think you get in playoffs, and I don't think you'd be pushing at third, but I think you've got to start kind of improving the depth a little bit. I'm not saying we're not good enough now. It's just that when you need to see a game out, I kind of look at our bench, especially we've got some injuries, and I'm thinking this is kind of the best we've got on the pitch. And if they're not doing it, then we're not kind of getting anywhere. So we need someone that can kind of, like you say, push us over that line, start winning games with a bit of confidence, like the Solihull Moors game. I mean, in my opinion, that's the best I've seen us all season. But to put the season as a whole, I know I'm a little bit pessimistic because all I've seen is me getting my hopes up, and then it's never come through, whether that's been relegation or whether it's losing playoffs, losing in cups. That's all I've seen. It's all I know. So getting my hopes up has never, ever helped me. So secure the playoffs. I think someone made a good point. I can't remember who I was speaking to, but you get yourself playoffs. You're gonna come up the best against the best sides in the league. It's how it's going to work this season, and we've played the best football against them sides. So it might not be the worst thing in the world, but we'll see how we go. But I think I'm accepting playoffs, but I'd really love for us to get a second or third.
Ian Birchnell says, Paul, you have to be careful you don't get disillusioned if that's your expectations. I've come to terms with being in National League, and if we are for a couple more seasons, then so be it. Don't want that. But I will not come to terms with this club being in the National League. You know, I'm sorry, winners and losers. We are losers if we stay in this National League. I'm sorry, mentality. I will never get disillusioned, Ian. You know, and I've had this conversation with Akko, who's a similar age to me, who many of you will know runs the buses and all the rest of it. And he uses the analogy, if not to win the Central Midlands League, it'd still go every game. So would I. So my disillusionment is never going to manifest itself to not contributing, not going. Why else would I have gone to Eastleigh on Saturday, Boreham Wood Tuesday? And I don't want any plaudits for that. I'm just saying, I will never be disillusioned. But in my life, in my professional career, there's winners and losers. And to be a winner, you have got to put it all in. And for me, losers, there's always an excuse to lose. There's always an excuse. Well, Wrexham have spent more money than us, or Chesterfield have bought Shimanga, you know. Or if we're great in the middle third of the pitch, if we can just stop conceding the goals from set pieces, these are all excuses. Don't talk about it, do it. And I know it's easier said than done, but that's kind of my mentality. Chris Gosling says, taking the stress and pressure factors out of it, I've actually really enjoyed it this season, but that may be appreciating going to games again after COVID shutdown of fans in grounds. And I guess there'd be a little bit of that, Chris, in terms of size of crowds that not just Notts are getting, but all clubs are getting. There's certainly been a bounce back. Inspector 71 says we need 2 players who go straight into the first 11 in Jan if we want to win the league. And I understand the use of the word if in that sentence, but for me, it's not if. We do want to win the league. You know, you cannot aim for anything other. You cannot aim for anything other. Gary Wardle says we couldn't keep Ellis or buy Shimanga. That's what it would take for us to realistically expect top 3. Gary Wardle, true, Paul, but we can't expect our talented youth to be winners. Disagree. Hey, they're not 17 years old. Okay. Our youth are 21, 22, 23. Tommy Johnson, Mark Draper, you know. I don't think we're playing a team of 17 or 18-year-olds. There is enough experience and blend in this squad, in my opinion, for us to be winners. Michael Wall, I'll never accept us being in this league. The day you accept that is the day you belong here. It's obviously sparking a bit of debate here. Pythagorean, big central defender, as we need strengthening in January. Just no confidence that we can keep goals out. Chris Gosling, if we go and splash the cash on a striker, he says a stroker. I don't know what one of them is, but anyway, on a striker, it'll be a replacement for Wootton and not a partner for him, because IB will play Ruben alongside a number 9 as long as he's here. Trevor Scanlon, we seem to find it hard to push on when taking the lead, and I think we need to solve this problem. Until we do, I think it will be a case of win one, lose one. Paul, talk to me from a player's mentality. Okay, so you've played in the pro ranks, and one of the challenges I believe for Notts at the minute is that we're a big fish in a relatively small pond. When you were at Notts, largely we would have been a smaller fish in a bigger pond. So the mentality or the expectation for Ian Birchin or for our playing squad is to win a lot more games than we lose. Yeah, and by any benchmark, you have to be in the playoffs this season. As a player, how do you cope with those kind of different expectations, mentality, pressures?
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that. You know, the talent gets you so far, doesn't it? And then the rest of it, the game's played in your head, and it's a mental side of things. And you know, with sports psychology and and the levels, the detail. You know, the Dave Brailsford, you know, margins, the gains. It's tough. It's everyone's cup final. You come to Meadow Lane. I mean, when I see it on the TV now, you think, crikey, how is this club in non-league? You know, you look at the facilities, you look at the stadium. You know, I remember when the years when it was built, when we were apprentices, and they were knocking down the stands. And now you look at it now, and you think, how is this club in non-league football? And obviously for a variety of different reasons, but yeah, it's clearly everyone's cup final to come to Meadow Lane, play on that pitch, play in that stadium. Did I see recently that there was a record crowd at Meadow Lane for one of the games? You know, I mean, and this is non-league football, so absolutely, you know, people far more qualified than me will tell you about, you know, the mental strength that the players need these days and I think that is the difference between the top elite players and the players that perhaps are playing at that level. Is the top players produce top performances week in, week out, you know, regardless, and perhaps the others that aren't hitting those levels, you know, make a career lower down the leagues. So it's a tough job, no doubt.
Because when you were at Notts, you know, I think you spoke, didn't you, about was it the FA Youth Cup run you had where you got to something semi-final, FA Youth Cup quarter-final or semi-final, went down to West Ham. I mean, was part of the motivation there being, you know, the village team, Little Notts County, going to West Ham?
Yeah. But that was the culture. That was inbred in us. You know, if you were part of one of Mick Walker's youth teams, then that was it. You know, absolutely. We were united. We were such a tight knit group of lads. You know, we'd be smashing, you know, the Nottingham Forest, who'd have, you know, international from Ireland and Scotland and Wales and whatever else, and we've got lads from Hucknall, Bulwell, wherever. You know, it was just. But we'd be stronger. We'd want it more. We'd be more aggressive, and they used to hate playing against us. And I think that there's a lot said for that. You know, that sort of mentality, and but yeah, that group of lads, and I remember the names now. You know, your Michael Johnsons that went on to have a great career, Jimmy Walker, you know, 500 odd league games. You know, Michael Simpson went on, Tommy Gallagher, you know, all you know, Gary Patterson, all had league careers, and all with it were in part of that successful youth team. Yeah, real good times.
Yeah, I'm massively into DNA. You know, I'm massively into DNA, and I am still, I think somewhere along the way, Notts lost their DNA quite a few years ago, and have never rediscovered it. And somehow out of the ashes, someone is going to do it. But you know, in many respects, you know, you spoke there about Notts being the little team, confounding the bigger teams with the big budgets and all the rest of it. We are now, as a football club, in completely the opposite situation. You know, we are the big team. You know, unfortunately we got beat 4-1 by Woking, who are still part-time. You know, and that's Woking coming to our ground. And, you know, it's difficult, but I just think we've somehow got to recapture that mentality. You know, I think Sutton had it last year. And I think everybody to a man would have had Sutton down as being 92nd in the Football League. Comfortably in the top half. You know, and that is that proves that you don't need to spend money like Wrexham or Stockport in this division, to me. And I just think sometimes there can be a lot of reasons to fail, but I think you've got to put yourself on the line as to why you're going to succeed. And like you say, a lot of this is psychological. You know, hey, let's be honest. The year Notts got relegated, right? First time we ever had a full-time psychologist. So that obviously didn't work very well. You know, I'm not saying it's because of the psychologist, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying we had a full-time psychologist, got relegated, you know.
But I mean, even like, you know, if you go back in the years, like Notts had those, you know, we had the youth team players coming through. They had it was the School of Excellence at the time, you know, Monday nights at the back of the ground under that shed area that I don't think is there anymore. But that, and you know, they got us young under 700 age. We'd turn up on a Monday night, and then we'd get off at the YTS. But I don't see that anymore. I don't see where that's coming from for Notts. I mean, obviously I'm out of the loop a little bit now, but certainly when I speak to people, I don't see where the next, you know, like you said earlier, Mark Draper, Tommy Johnsons are. Where are they coming from? Again, only from my experience, it was you know. The scouts that were watching the under 10s and under 11s, they were from Sheffield United, they were from Sheffield Wednesday, they were from There was no one from Notts. So I'm thinking, I'm saying, well, why aren't Notts County here looking for the same players that Forest are and so on? I don't know, we just seem to have missed a generation of young talent.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's another show. We should almost get you back and with another graduates of our academy. Premier League have loaded the dice unquestionably in the way academies operate now. And it would most probably be the case if Notts had the equivalent of a Mark Draper or Tommy Johnson or any club in the lower divisions, most probably at 14, they would have been nicked. Yeah. You did this you cannot keep them. Yeah. So at 14, if a bigger club comes in and offers us a fixed sum of money, they have to go. You can't keep them. So the Premier League have kind of manipulated the rules on academies. And so I could tell you that there was a lad went from Notts who was about 14. I think he was a Welsh under 15 international. I think it's all largely kept quiet. Forest paid whatever the fee is, £25,000-30,000, and he moves across quietly from Notts County to Nottingham Forest. Nothing Notts could do about it. But it is a very valid point you raise, because the model that our owners are pursuing at the minute is buying in players 19, 20, 21, 22, or not getting them free. Yeah. And then looking to improve them, improve the team, and potentially have a resale value a little bit further down the line. But as a result of a third season in the academy, our academy has in all but name disintegrated. And this is something that I want to perhaps do a show on, because my understanding now is Notts as academy, I'm not really sure. Academy sounds a grand word. So at the minute, the students in Notts as academy have to pay in the same way as if you are paying subs at Rice Park under 15s, Rice Park under 16s. Now, you know, and I know that's not quite historically how it's operated. Quite a few of those players have left. Certainly the better players, because the focus of the club now is on bringing in players And the argument would be because we lose the funding for an academy. But I think that is an interesting debating point as to where you bring your players. We have got one, I think, if he can get game time, outstanding prospect, and that's Tierney, the goalkeeper, who's a local boy. Not exactly sure where he's from. The local Nottingham lad, I believe. He's 17, played in all the pre-season. He's about 6'4". He looks the business. I just hope he can get the games to help him progress.
I mean, do you remember Blathers? Remember Steve Blatherwick? He did the 2-year YTS with Notts, and then gets snapped up at the end of his YTS, and Forest snap him up, and then goes and goes and doubles his money across the Trent while we were on £150 a week at Meadow Lane.
I think part of it is demonstrating a tangible pathway, isn't it? So that as a parent, and you've been through this. I mean, question: your son ends up at Barnsley. How does he end up there? How did he end up at Forest? What was you were part of that process, weren't you? That decision making process.
Yeah, absolutely. And but that was my frustration, because we'd have come to Notts. We were like, we were saying, why at Notts County? Why at Notts County here looking? And he was saying, like, Dad, where are Notts? We're asking those questions, and it's just, and I know, Dad, it's down to finance and budgets and resourcing and all the rest of it. But I don't know. I just think the club's missed a trick. Certainly, from my point of view, where I've seen it now as a parent going through it with the son and myself. So, yeah, difficult.
How do you see your son's progression going through the modern day academy system compared to yours?
Very different, particularly because he's been during COVID as well. So the pandemic has had a significant impact on game time, but not just that. The other side of things, just to the friends I've made through Notts County, and like as you know, Paul, are lifelong friends. But I don't feel that he's got that bond and togetherness that we had. And I know it's a different era. I know the culture's changed. But for example, they go in, they don't get changed, they don't shower because they can't. So they meet in the stand, they train, they finish, they go home. So the hour after training is often the best hour of the day. Once you finish training and you're with everybody. So I think he's had a very different experience. And the head of the academy there is Bobby Hassel. You'll know from Mansfield and from Barnsley. Yeah. And he's been brought up very much the same mould, if you like, as perhaps my era from the Notts lads. So he knows what it's like as such. But he openly says that it's very different. He says to me it's a different game now. Shales to what we were part of, back in the 90s. And the way that Jack's treated, my Jack treated to how I was treated. The coach, what Mick Walker used to say to us, they wouldn't get away with saying that clearly, to the modern day academy footballers now. But as we said previously, Paul, it didn't do us any harm, put it that way.
Yeah, it's a very good debate. And again, we often say there's no rights and there's no wrongs, but it is an interesting debate. Chloe, you're sitting there patiently. The final word will be with you. Dagenham and Redbridge, 5:20 are on the telly. Shirley's is coming off the 12th of the floodlit golf course to make sure he watches it. 2 home games now, and we all count our chickens, don't we? But again, the flip of the coin will be totally different if we can do what we will be expected to do in these home games.
Absolutely. I'm expecting 6 points, to be completely honest. Taking in consideration their form, how we've been playing both home games, and especially after 2 possibly disappointing results, especially 1 point out of 2 games. So I'm going into these 2 hoping for the big 6. So we'll see. But I fancy us Saturday first. Unfortunately, I do think we'll concede, but I think it'll be 3-1, quite convincing. But yeah, possibly not a clean sheet.
Well, I'll take 1-0. 1-0 any day of the week. Clean sheet, you're never going to lose, eh? thank you very much to everybody for taking part in tonight's show. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much to Chloe. Send in your thoughts on the video that's gone on our social media platform. Where do you travel in from? Experiences, long journeys, all of those sorts of things. Paul, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Doha. I'm sure I will see you in the not too distant future. I need to have an advanced scouting trip ahead of Qatar and various clients for the World Cup. I'm sure, you know, I've given you a small task, haven't I? Luxury penthouse overlooking the sea, £50 a night, duration of the World Cup. I'm going to need £100 a night. Okay, that's fair enough.
I'm going to need a bigger apartment, I think.
Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Look forward to speaking to you all soon. Take care.